My name is Rowan Ellison. I'm 28, a fraud analyst by trade, a disappointment by reputation, and apparently the only one in my family who still reads fine print. Lunch had just settled into its false calm when my uncle leaned forward, called me sweetheart, and slid a manila folder across the table like it was dessert. No one paused, no one blinked, but I knew this wasn't generosity, it was bait. And when I opened that folder, the pieces snapped into place, clean, sharp, undeniable. I wore black, tailored blazer, high-neck ivory blouse, slacks that pressed silence into every step, not to impress, to shield, because some families make you earn the right to exist. My hair was pinned into a low twist. No earrings, no lipstick, no invitation to be soft. The table was already full. 8 chairs, 8 plates. Perfect symmetry, except for one thing, my name, scribbled on a napkin. Blue ballpoint, sharp tilt, not printed like the others, just an afterthought, half-hearted and late. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the only empty chair, smoothed the wrinkled napkin, and sat. No one greeted me. No one said, "Glad you came." My mother looked at me once, then away, like she wasn't supposed to break the script. Uncle Darren kept carving meat like it was a ritual. Aunt Lydia poured wine with a fake laugh that didn't match the moment. Jonah, the golden boy, rambled about crypto losses like they were badges of honor. The conversation moved around me like a stream parting around a rock. Deliberate. Practiced. I was there but not included. Present but not permitted. And I noticed everything. Because when you've been erased in slow, quiet ways for years, you stop waiting for recognition and start watching for intent. The butter dish passed me. So did the bread. No one asked if I was thirsty, but the wine glass in front of me was already filled, rosé, slightly warm. The kind they all know I don't drink. The kind I once blacked out from years ago. They remember, they just didn't care. I let the glass sit untouched. The air was thick with polite poison. A room pretending nothing was wrong, which always means something is. They smiled like hosts, but I wasn't a guest. I was a variable they hadn't solved for. And they didn't know I already had the answer. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. There was no plate at my setting. No fork, no knife. Just that wrinkled napkin and the space between their intentions. "Oh," Aunt Lydia chirped, her voice 2 octaves too high. "We didn't think you'd actually come." Then she laughed like that explained everything. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer like I belonged to the house, because once I did. I grabbed a plate, silverware, a water glass, and came back. Still no one offered to help. No one said sorry. I sat, cut a piece of bread with the knife I brought myself, and chewed like I wasn't swallowing betrayal in dry slices. They kept talking, as if I hadn't just assembled my own seat at the table again. Jonah was mid-rant about regulatory nonsense and banker politics. Uncle Darren chuckled like a man who never read a compliance manual in his life. They said words like portfolio, seed capital, scalable, but none of them noticed my eyes weren't on the food. They were on the folder beside my uncle's left hand, unlabeled, worn at the edges. Not an accident, he saw me glance, he smiled. And that's when I knew he brought it for me, not to confess, but to see if I was still as naive as they remembered. I lifted my water, took a sip, not to quench anything but to slow myself down, because what I was feeling couldn't be shown in that room. Not yet. I don't remember what sentence came before he did it. Maybe something about interest rates. Maybe Jonah name-dropping some investor he never actually met. It didn't matter. Uncle Darren reached over the gravy dish, slid the folder toward me like it was dessert, like it belonged next to the mashed potatoes and family secrets. "Thought you might want to look this over," he said. "Sweetheart." I looked at the folder, then at him. He didn't blink, didn't smirk, just sat back in his chair like he hadn't just detonated the air between us. I didn't touch it, not yet. I finished the bite of chicken I'd already committed to, placed my fork down neatly, wiped the corner of my mouth with the same napkin that had carried my name like a stain. Then I opened it. The first page wasn't shocking. It was familiar. A Wellspring Education Trust account, my name printed at the top, my date of birth, my father's signature. The fund he opened when I was 8, the one they told me was lost during the market dip. I turned the page. Transaction logs, dates, withdrawals, digital authorizations, not one in my handwriting. Then came the scans, my signature, on 4 forms, except it wasn't mine, it looked like mine. Sloppy, under pressure, like someone trying to mimic how I used to sign things before I turned 18. Someone had practiced, not perfectly, just enough to pass through a system that doesn't look too closely. And then I saw the disbursement. $38, 400 wired to a joint account under Jonah's name. Labeled, "Family Emergency." I felt it in my chest first, not like a punch, more like the slow sting of remembering you believed someone when they lied to your face. I flipped another page. Another transfer. This one smaller, $6,000, labeled Home Renovations. Aunt Lydia had redone her kitchen that year. White quartz countertops. I remembered the Instagram story. The caption was, "Treat yourself, you deserve it." Apparently, I did the treating. I didn't speak, didn't look up, but something inside me clicked shut, like a drawer, like a vault, like a girl who stopped asking to be included and started preparing to disappear. When I was 8, my dad took me to the bank. I remember the pen they gave me to hold, blue with a little chain attached. He let me print my name on the account setup form, even though it wasn't legally needed. "Sign it anyway," he whispered, "just so it feels like yours." It did. Even at 8, it felt like a promise. He called it the Wellspring Fund. Said it was for college, maybe grad school. Said it was my safety net, in case life ever tries to knock you sideways. It did knock me hard. He died when I was 14. Brain aneurysm, no warning. One breath here, gone the next. After the funeral, they told me the account was wiped out. Market crash, they said. It was all in investments, they said, and I believed them. Because grief makes liars look like caretakers, so I got scholarships, took out loans, worked in a student tech lab where the Wi-Fi barely reached the supply closet, slept on a couch for 2 years because my roommate never really moved out. I boiled pasta in a kettle, sold class notes for cash, watched my cousin Jonah get a new laptop every semester while I coded with a screen that flickered when it got cold. And still, I didn't ask. I didn't accuse. Because when you grow up being the strong one, you learn to starve your suspicions before they eat your family. But that folder changed the rules. It wasn't just the theft. It was the quiet certainty with which they did it. The confidence that I would never ask. That if I found out, I still wouldn't fight. That's what burned. Not the money, the mathematics of betrayal. I closed the folder. Didn't say a word, didn't accuse. Just pushed it aside like a napkin I was done with. Uncle Darren was watching me. Not smug. Not nervous, just watching, like he wanted to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I poured myself a glass of water, took a small sip, and nodded at a comment Jonah made about real estate. The game had started. I wasn't playing it loud. After dessert store-bought, too sweet, just like Lydia, I excused myself. Said I needed to check on a work thing. Walked to the guest room, closed the door, locked it, sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my laptop, opened the folder I'd prepared months ago. It was labeled "If They Lie." I'd started it the day I requested archived transaction history from Wellspring. Just a hunch back then. Now a weapon. Drag, attach, attach, attach. Copies of every transaction, screenshots, timestamp comparisons, signature overlays, statement from the original notary who confirmed the signature wasn't hers. Subject line: unauthorized access to protected trust request for formal review recipients. My father's old attorney. The internal fraud team at Wellspring, IRS Office of Whistleblower, and for good measure, the compliance officer at Jonah's startup's biggest investor. I hovered over send. Not because I was unsure, because I knew what would happen next. Families break in different ways, some with screaming, some with silence. Ours would break in paperwork. I clicked. Message sent. Read receipts disabled. Tracking pixels embedded. I closed the laptop, fixed my collar, checked my reflection once. I looked unbothered, which was the most dangerous thing I could be. Then I walked back out to the dining room, sat down, and smiled. Like I hadn't just started a fire they couldn't see yet. When I came back, the table was louder than before, but it was all the wrong kind of noise. Jonah had shifted topics to travel points. Lydia was offering seconds of a pie no one finished. My mother was laughing at something that hadn't been funny in years, and Uncle Darren was tapping the side of his wine glass. Not absent-mindedly, rhythmic, controlled, like he was keeping time with a plan that had just started to unravel. I took my seat, picked up my fork, cut a piece of chicken I didn't want, and waited. Because here's the thing they never understood about me. I was never trying to be invited in. I was just collecting patterns. And the moment the email left my outbox, the house changed. Not visibly, not loudly, but chemically. The air got thinner, like someone cracked a window in winter. Darren's tap slowed, then stopped. He glanced at his phone just once and slid it back into his jacket too quickly. My mother reached for the butter but missed the dish by a few inches. Her hand trembled slightly when she pulled it back. Lydia was talking about oven settings now, temperature, timers, broil vs bake, but her voice kept cracking like the heat was too high inside her own head. They didn't know yet, not fully, but their bodies did. Their nerves had heard what their brains hadn't caught up to. Something had shifted, and I just chewed, like none of it mattered. Because to them, maybe I was still the quiet one. Still the girl with the stitched mouth and the open wallet. But that version of me had just filed 4 complaints, triggered 2 audits, and routed everything through a private inbox they didn't know existed. And all they had left was the sound of a fork against porcelain. I didn't drive home in anger. I wasn't shaking, wasn't crying. I drove like I always do, calm, careful, one hand on the wheel, the other tracing the edge of my coat sleeve. The texts didn't start until the next morning. The first was from my mother, no greeting, no punctuation. "Did you really send something? Please tell me you didn't." Then, "Rowan, don't do this, we're family." I didn't respond. At lunch, Lydia called. I let it ring. Then let it ring again, then let it ring out. She left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, this is a misunderstanding. Those forms were approved years ago. We thought it was okay. Don't let this ruin everything." Everything. They always say that when they realize everything was built on silence. Next came Jonah. His message was short. "What the hell did you do?" I almost laughed. The same man who called me uptight when I asked about the joint account, now suddenly fluent in panic. That night, Uncle Darren called. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then picked up. Let him speak first. He didn't start with hello. He started with accusation. "You think the IRS is going to fix your broken trust issues? You've always had a flair for drama, haven't you? Who do you think you're hurting here? Yourself. That's who." I waited until he finished, then said calmly, clearly, "You forged my signature. You drained my father's fund. You moved money across state lines under false pretense. That's not family, that's a felony." Silence, not even a breath, then click. He hung up. I opened my phone, blocked him, blocked Lydia, blocked Jonah. Blocked the family group thread with its fake birthday wishes and seasonal emojis. Then I changed my number, filed a credit freeze, updated my will, moved my primary account to a credit union with 0 connections to anyone named Ellison. And when I shut off the lamp that night, my apartment had never felt quieter. Not empty, not lonely, just clean. They didn't fight the charges. Maybe it was the paper trail. Maybe it was the audit logs. Maybe it was the voicemail I saved where Lydia said, "We thought it was okay." But mostly, I think it was because they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. The case never made headlines. Just a quiet ruling, restitution, 1-year probation, mandatory financial ethics course, community service, no jail, just reputation decay. Uncle Darren lost his seat on the nonprofit board. Lydia closed her catering business due to personal stress. Jonah deleted all his social media and started delivering for an app he once mocked. I didn't follow the updates. Word found me anyway. A cousin on my dad's side mentioned the Ellison house was up for sale. Too much debt, too many eyes. No one asked where I was. No one reached out, not even my mother. I never replied to her final text, "You've changed." I had, that part was true, but not into someone cruel, not bitter. Just someone done playing small. At the bank, I reopened the Wellspring account. New number, new security layers, new name on the access form. Rowan Ellison, sole beneficiary, sole operator, verified. The teller asked if I wanted to list a backup contact. I said no, because for the first time in my life, I was the only one with the key. And that name, the one they wrote on napkins, the one they tried to sign and sell off, that name now lives on every page of the report that brought them down. That name is on the complaint, the court filing, the restitution order, the corrected trust document. And one thing they can never, ever erase is that it was me who signed the end of their version of the story.